Alright guys, Scrappy again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Crazy developments last night as a spanner, it seems, has been thrown in the works of the plans of Nature and the Los Angeles Thieves to form their super team over there. French organisation owned by former COD pro Gataga are apparently looking to not only buy the Los Angeles Guerrilla spots, but also drop a bag to bring HyDra and potentially Scrappy as well away from what LA Thieves are trying to do right now. Is this going to happen? What decision would all the parties involved, especially HyDra, take, especially with the French organisation potentially coming into play? Big rumours as well that OpTic Texas, despite winning the World Championship, are going to be forced to take a pay cut. Loads we've got to dive into. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, we've got to dive into some of the updates here on the Cloud9 situation because they were getting roasted hard yesterday and for understandable reasons. Partly, to be fair, because the CEO, Jack Etienne, he came on like Reddit basically as soon as they'd announced the team and said, look, we're going to re-sign the players, going to do our best to, keep things as they are basically. That's clearly not happening. So the question has been why. Now the reason why is always on both elements in some sense, because we quite clearly knew, certainly at the Esports World Cup, that that roster was not going to be staying the same going into the new season. So as Jack says on the Reddit, to clarify some of these things last night, a number of things actually. Firstly this, it's been a complex off-season. I planned to fully keep the roster for next year, but the players have asked for changes. I'm doing my best to accommodate their asks while building a team of players that actually want to play together. I'm still not looking to make a cash grab. I am willing to spend. I'm not going to force players to play where they don't want to be. So that's pretty emphatic really. Of course you can try and read between the lines on which players he might be referring to here, which players, because let's be real, the team wanted Sib gone. They didn't get along with him for whatever reason. We talked about that before. Sib's gone. I mean, restricted free agent, he's out of there. But of course, we're also hearing, I'm not going to force players to play where they don't want to be, which can only be HyDra, can it not? Because I don't think Kismet and Skyz are getting like, mega supermax contract offers from a team that's better than Cloud9. So that can only really be HyDra. So I feel like that's almost confirming that, yeah, HyDra wants to go. He wants to go to another team. He wants to play with a different set of players, and fair enough. But, he says, I'm not going to force players to stay if they don't want to, so HyDra's probably going to go. 99% guaranteed would potentially be the read into this. And as he then goes on to say, my first move was to fully run it back with the same roster. My second move has been to support the players and the coaches in what they're trying to do. It's been very difficult to achieve these goals. These were like all the other things he said on the Reddit as well. So, we looked at this statement and, we saw a couple of these statements and, yeah, he goes on to say as well, I could force a player to stay under contract and play with players he's unhappy with, but that's not how I operate. So, is that HyDra? Probably yes. Has HyDra changed his mind on who he wants to team with? Probably, knowing that Scrappy might now be available. And, he says, I signed up to get a world-class roster and was shocked to have a situation where it wasn't possible to keep it without forcing them to stay in a situation they were not happy with. And maybe fair enough, but equally, you've got to expect these things. Like, they bought this team and acquired it kind of during that run towards the World Championship with EWC to follow. And especially because that core as a team had been together some time, I think, and also we know HyDra's ambitions in COD, I think it would have not exactly been massively unexpected that if they didn't win the World Championship, which they didn't, and didn't win EWC, which they didn't, then changes would be called for. And, I don't think Jack should be surprised, frankly, that Call of Duty teams want to make changes after not really winning as much as they would have liked to during the course of the season. But let's talk about one of the other dramas of the day, the OpTic Texas side. OpTic players have been requested to take a pay cut. Now, we've got to dive into all the sides of this because this is not a new phenomenon in esports, certainly not Call of Duty esports. And we've seen it before not that long ago with the likes of FaZe. I mean, we're pretty sure that FaZe from 2021 to 22 to 23, every year was said, look, we don't really have the money to fund the salaries you were on last year. We're going to have to pay you a little bit less. It is interesting that this is happening, especially because they won the World Championship, but many esports organizations struggling as ever with keeping the books afloat, especially with how much a lot of these guys are actually getting paid. And there is a trend towards a little bit more financial responsibility from some of these teams, which I think in the long run is probably a good thing. What I will say, and many of you guys commented this yesterday, and I'm pretty sure we talked about this a year or so ago, when the rumor was that Los Angeles Thieves were going to take a, budget cut basically to their roster. Many people said at the time, and even today, that, they were ahead of the curve on some level, right? They saved money for a year, and now somehow they have like $2 million or like at least $1 million basically, to spend on potentially trying to put this super team together. Whereas OpTic, on the other hand, they paid the Supermax on lots of these deals. They won the big one, but it's not like there's infinite money rolling around there behind the scenes, and as a result, they may, you know, the players might have to take a relatively substantial reduction to their pay. It's happened with other orgs before over the last few years, where, you know, they sign players for big money, trying to win the big things. Once they do, they then say, all right, guys, you know, I know you want to stick together because you just won. Let's drop those salaries down a little bit so we can actually ensure that we can balance the books to properly make that happen. When you're an OpTic, it's not the end of the world because, you know, you turn the stream on, right? I think that is the benefit that you've got playing for OpTic, is that okay, the salaries might not be where the players might like them to be, or maybe not even as much as some of these other organizations out there are paying, but you can easily make up for that if you turn the stream on for a few hours a day or a few hours a month. Most certainly is still possible. So not the end of the world, but nonetheless interesting for the organization, especially this. I thought was pretty funny, right? Pred after his European World Tour. Okay, Europe, World, like whatever. You can't have a World Tour if it's just Europe, but he's not even in just Europe. He's back in Bondi Bay, I think I saw today, which of course is back in Australia, where he's originally from. So Pred's been all over the place, and you know, I thought it was pretty funny, the idea that Pred's checking his text messages and seeing you're taking a pay cut. I mean, like, oh my god, how am I going to pay off the credit card? I thought Jake Hale's tweet here was quite interesting though, as he says it's the beginning of the end. So what does that mean? Does it mean that OpTic get cooked, like it's over for them? Doubtful, although it is interesting, isn't it, right, that obviously OpTic were OpTic, and then they sold to Immortals, then Immortals kind of bought them back effectively. Hex was able to get the organization back after a couple of years of partnering with NRG, then he partnered with Hastro, with Envy, and, you know, Envy now no longer exists, and it's just OpTic, right? But still, money struggles, it seems, are only just around the corner here, and I would say maybe what Jake Hale's really getting at is it's the beginning of the end of this kind of like era, in a sense, of what we have had in the CDL over the last few years, when the salaries have been largely inflated beyond what they should potentially be. Some of the money flying around from VC investors has been pretty crazy. Now, there's an argument to say that some of the money that's been flying into these teams from venture capital over the last few years, which has now massively dried up. Really, it was 2018, 19, 20, most certainly 2021, 22, those type of years, there was lots of money flooding in, and not much of it was spent wisely. There's still money out there interested to be invested in esports coming from Saudi Arabia, basically, but I think the teams are gonna probably have to go back to a more responsible running of their organizations. Maybe that's what Jake Hale's getting at, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting development right now. I'm not so familiar with the MLB 2017, 2018 off-season. If you guys can fill me into the comments, that would be appreciated. EasyMac actually did talk about this as well, and said that basically every single organization has done this. Salaries are coming down to a healthy level, which should also incentivize players to make more content, which is probably true. So that's an interesting take, which I'm not going to complain about, of course. And like he says, COD is a content esport in NA, very attractive for orgs that can pull sponsorships. If we can make the ecosystem healthy for organizations while players are creating a ton of content, then it's going to work for the best in the longer term. So, you know, hopefully this could be a step towards how maybe things used to be. Zinni was talking about it as well and saying, well, it ain't really a pay cut, you're going from 400 to 300. And I get what he means, because it's like, you know, whatever your lifestyle is at 400, it's not going to be drastically different at 300, but that's still like a pretty substantial pay cut. I mean, let's be real, like, it is a pay cut, like, I'm not gonna lie. But let's talk about the big roster drama though from yesterday. So we've talked about the last few days. What is going to be happening here with the Los Angeles Guerrillas, the Carolina Royal Ravens, whether these orgs are going to get sold? And obviously Ronnie talked about it yesterday, Studio Intel, that possibly if LA Guerrillas are going to get sold, they're in conversations for that happening, and it might well be a European organization. We've talked about Fnatic, and now we're talking about Gentlemates. So a big organization in France, mainly because of Gataga, legendary old school COD pro actually, but just massive content creator in the French scene over the last several years now, doing all sorts of cool stuff. He's got his own organization. They're in Valorant, they're in some other things as well. Of course, they were in COD. They hired that team, the Bants team, with Harry and those guys for the Esports World Cup that they represented there, and the viewership was mega. I mean, Scump had, in terms of EWC co-streamers, the most views was 79,000, but Gataga only streamed his own games. When Gataga was streaming Gentlemates group stage games, they were getting 50k. And that was all he was streaming of the tournament, right? So, you know, the extent of this organization and the extent of the reach is mega. And if Gentlemates came into the scene, it would be a big deal in that region. And as I've said before, I want this stuff to happen. Like, I want the Call of Duty League to be a global league. I think it's better for the future of the sport that we have representation around the world. That's why I like the fact that Heretics are a Spanish team. I like the fact that Falcons are fielding a Saudi team, and I'd love to have a French team as well. Is there the talent for a full French team? Maybe not. Is there the talent for one French player and maybe a couple of other French-speaking players, or just an absolute super team involving a French superstar? That might well work as well. And that's when rumours are now emerging that Gentlemates are in talks to not only acquire the Call of Duty League spot of Los Angeles Guerrillas, but also sabotage, as Jake Hale says, the LA Thieves God Squad, with offers coming in for Scrap and HyDra. So this situation is expected to be resolved relatively soon, but apparently Gataga's coming in and be like, alright, I am going to start making some plays here, because we've heard things have been held up over the last few days. It seems pretty clear that Toronto, like, Scrap ain't going to be on Toronto, it seems, right? There's too much interest, and especially if there becomes some sort of like a bidding war between Gentlemates and Thieves, then Toronto are definitely going to sell him. Obviously, HyDra seems to want to leave Cloud9, and what we saw earlier, so he's probably going to go. Where do they end up? That is a question that nobody really knows the answer to. But yeah, Gentlemates are coming in, and they're interested in effectively trying to, and this is what Najot said yesterday, was like, look, until the contracts are signed and we've announced it, don't get your hopes up, Los Angeles Thieves fans, because who knows what's going to happen. Maybe this is what he was getting at, that, you know, Gentlemates are coming in, they're going to take over Guerrilla's spot, which hopefully they do. Like, I don't want Guerrillas to have a CDL spot again next season, and they want to sign, I mean, HyDra would be absolutely the target. And if you're HyDra, what do? Let's say you've got the offer to go to Thieves, or you've got the offer, maybe for similar money or whatever, to go to a French organisation to represent Gataga's team. And I don't think it's worth underestimating how a big of a deal that would be, and how popular that would make HyDra in the French community, and how he would go from, you know, being where he is now as a very talented and well-known and well-liked player, but not with a massive personality or brand, to having everything associated with being an absolute top-level superstar of this league. That is what would happen if Gentlemates came in. Like, that's how serious they are as an organisation. In that region, of course. I mean, obviously, people are then going to speculate, well, what if Falcons come in at the final hour and they start dropping the hammer? But also, Gentlemates, like, if they want Scrap and HyDra, do they want Envoy as well? I mean, CDOS Screamintel kind of talked about this, that Scrap kind of wants to team with Envoy. That would be the ideal for him, but and maybe Thieves will make that happen, because probably they want Envoy back, but maybe Gentlemates wouldn't. Maybe they'd want Scrap, HyDra, someone else. Maybe Linz they might try and sign or bring in, or who knows, right? Maybe as the partner to HyDra. There's some interesting possibilities here, but it's gonna be crazy to see how this gets resolved, because it does not seem to be clear-cut at all, and it seems like Gentlemates are serious about making this happen. Then there's the possibility of getting a Gentlemates LAN, which they could run. Obviously, we've talked about maybe Heretics could run one in Spain. The UK stays suffering, obviously, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, at least we could get to France and Spain pretty easily from over here. And just one final thing on Rostermania. How about this? Vancouver are apparently looking to push to sign HyDra, which I've talked about HyDra over the last few days being an option, and I think he's on the borderline of being a good option. This is interesting though, right? So aBeZy 04 are going to stay. The rumour had it that Nastie and Kremp were potentially going to come in from the former Thieves team, but maybe they're looking at HyDra instead. So, you know, that's pretty interesting. Just stay tuned for whether that goes anywhere, but massively intrigued to your thoughts, as always, and all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
OpTic cutting costs, bro. I saw the same tweet you guys did. I mean, you're not going to believe me, but I really don't know much about that. I mean, I kind of stay in my own lane and stream, but every team is cutting costs. So I'm not, if that's true, I'm not shocked, because every team should be cutting costs. And everyone, bro, people see pay cuts. Like, I'm going to give you guys an example of a team that took pay cuts before. Going from $400,000 a year per player to $300,000 per year per player isn't really a fucking pay cut, dude. It's still a super inflated salary that players are blessed to have. Obviously, I guess it sucks going from, for example, 400 to 300K, but the salaries are still very inflated. 100K isn't a lot. I'm not saying 100K is not a lot. All I'm saying is going from $400,000 to $300,000 is still a very good position to be in.